there, I'm Liz, your host here at Crimes Untold. Apologies, you can probably hear a siren in the background. I live in a city, so... and, my corner office studio in my room is next to a window. Anywho, today we're going to be talking about another unsolved serial killer. We're going to be talking about the Hammersmith Nude Murders. We're going back to England. Yes. If you are new here, I already introduced myself. I'm Liz. There's another introduction for you. In case you missed it, you're just average weirdo that likes to talk about some true crime. So if that piqued your interest, I highly suggest you hit that subscribe button, turn your post notifications on all. That way you know whenever I upload. Thank you all so much for how much you actually liked my true crime, like, roundup, recap, whatever the heck. Yeah, I think I called it a roundup. That I posted on Saturday. I'm actually really happy you guys liked that because it was something so out of my comfort zone, and you know what? I'm going to continue to do so. So stay tuned for that. Every Saturday I'm going to post one of those. But anywho, let's get into today's true crime case, shall we? So, these murders occurred between 1964 and 1965. Now, at first it wasn't 1964, but I'll kind of get into that as I go. So, and these were in West London, England. In all technicality, the first murder was actually in 1959, which is what we're going to start off with. So, this serial killer as well, because his crimes kind of imitated Jack the Ripper, plus with some of the references to how these victims were found, this serial killer was dubbed Jack the Stripper, and no, I'm not kidding. So, our first victim we're going to be discussing is that of Elizabeth Figg, but she also went by the name of Anne Phillips. So at around 12:05 a.m., they heard a woman scream, and this scream was heard from a man and his wife that saw cars' headlights from across the river at Duke's Meadows, and these headlights had shut off, and the car seemed like it was parked for like a little late night rendezvous, a little fun. Well, they didn't think anything of it until after the discovery that would be made on the following day. Well, or that same day, but you know what I mean. The body of a woman was found against a tree at around 5:10 a.m. by some police officers on June 17th of 1959. She was positioned in a slouching, kind of like slouched against the tree. This discovery was made on the North Bank area of the Thames River in Duke's Meadows, specifically between Dan Mason Drive and the towpath of the river, which was about 200 yards away from the Barnes Bridge. So this area is known to be Lover's Lane, and a lot of people frequented this area. So is she a victim of a scorned lover? Like, what happened? Well, so again, this in my brain correlates with the Thames Torso murders, which I covered in a previous video. I'll put that in a card above, because her body was found near the Thames River. So in my mind, it automatically goes back to that, but those are older crimes, obviously not the same person. So this woman's remains were found with her dress opened at the top, revealing her breasts, and it was torn at her waist, making it seem like obviously this crime was sexual in nature. There was markings consistent with that of strangulation found around her neck. She had scratches on her back, which was consistent with her being dragged, and one of her teeth were removed, or recently removed, from her mouth. Also, any of her personal possessions, if she had any, were missing from the scene, as were her shoes and her underwear. Potentially any and all of these could have been taken as souvenirs, but we don't know for sure. So when she was examined during her autopsy, it was determined that she died anywhere between midnight and 2 a.m. So when that man and that woman heard that girl scream, or the woman scream at 12:05, that potentially was when she was killed. She, unfortunately, would be identified by Pauline Mills, of whom she lived with. That was her roommate. And her mother also was able to identify her after she was informed by Pauline, and then she came down and she identified her. Next, we're going to talk about Gwyneth Reese. She also went by Georgette Reese, Tina Smart, and Tina Dawson. So, a nude female set of remains was discovered at a household, at the household of Barnesborough Council on the 8th of November of 1963. Gwyneth's remains were severely decomposed. This household is on Townsend Road in Mortlake. This dump site in which she was found was 40 yards away from the Thames towpath, which is just a mile from Duke's Meadows. Again, like I stated, she was found naked except for just one item of clothing. That item of clothing was a stocking. She was also missing 5 of her teeth that were removed either before death or after death, so pre or post-mortem. And unfortunately for us, she was found by one of the workers after they had struck her with a shovel when they were trying to level out the refuse. Gwyneth was discovered 2 feet below the refuse by the worker who was trying to clear it. Her remains were thought to have been moved there after she was killed due to no evidence proving that the murder occurred there. Police were also unable to determine her cause of death, nor were they able to prove that she was a victim of a sexually violent act or attack. After full examination of her remains, she is believed to have died as early as May of 1963, and her body laid there until she was discovered. So these 2 first murders of Elizabeth Figg and Gwyneth Reese were not connected to the other 3 until after a confession was made in 1964, of which I will kind of speak about in a little bit. So the police started looking at other cases and the possibility of other cases being related to these current murders that I will be discussing next. And these murders were never fully connected, the first 2 that I mentioned, so Elizabeth Figg and Gwyneth Reese. They were never fully connected to the remainder of cases, unfortunately. So the main cases that we will discuss starts with Hannah Talford. So the next body to be found was that of Hannah Talford, also known as Hannah Lynch, also known as Ann Taylor, also known as Ann Taylor. She was discovered by some members of the London Corinthians Sailing Club on February 2nd of 1964. She was found on the Thames foreshore, or what is also known as the intertidal zone. Police believe that she was thrown into the river 24 hours prior to, and that she was thrown in at Duke's Meadows. But realistically, she was in the water between 2 to 7 days, and that was proven during her autopsy. Her stockings were halfway up her legs. She had ripped underwear, and her ripped underwear were stuffed in her mouth. She was strangled. There was damage to her brain, and she also was missing some teeth. But her cause of death would be deemed a drowning. She was a prostitute by trade, but she was missing for just a few days. She also was currently pregnant with her 3rd child. So the last time she was seen was on January 31st of 1964. Just 2 days later, she would be found dead. Irene Lockwood would be our next female to be found. She was also known as Sandra Russell and also known as Sandra Lockwood. So at Corney Reach in Chiswick, there was another female found. She was pregnant at the time of her death, and she was naked. She had an injury to her arm, which was determined to be that of being hit by a propeller. So she was either in a boat or something to do with propellers. This discovery was made on April 8th of 1964. This is not far from where Hannah Talford was discovered. And this also helped aid in the thought that there was a serial killer in the area, because now we have 2 that are discovered. They're in similar areas, so this means they need to frequent these areas more often. At 7:15 a.m. on April 24th of 1964, another set of remains would be found. This was in an alleyway of 199 Boston Manor Road in Brentford. She was strangled, and she was also missing 3 teeth. She was determined to have been laying there, or had been dead for 48 hours prior to her being found. She was naked, found lying face down in a refuse, but police would find what would be flecks of paint on her body, which gave them a lead on possibly where the killer may have worked. This set of remains was that of Helen Bartholomew. On July 14th of 1964, another set of female remains was found. She was discovered right outside of 48 Berry Maid Road in Chiswick. It was said that just prior to the discovery of the body, neighbors heard a car going down the street in reverse and the sound of a door slamming. A neighbor, George Hurd, thought he saw a mannequin sitting upright against a garage door at number 48 on Berrymead Road. But it wasn't a mannequin. This was another woman. This female was nude and deceased. They were able to determine that this was Mary Fleming. She was deceased for approximately 3 days, and unlike the others, Mary actually didn't have any teeth. She wore dentures, but her dentures were missing. Oddly enough. Again, like with Helen, there was flecks of paint found on her body. On November 25th of 1964, the body of a woman was found at a car park on Horton Street in Kensington. She was discovered by David Sutton, an assistant civil defense officer. She was naked, she had bruising around her neck, she was strangled, she had burns and flecks of paint on her skin. She also had one missing tooth, and that had been recently removed. She also was good friends with Helen Bartholomew and Mary Fleming, 2 previous murder victims. It was believed that she had been dead for months, but it is known that the last time she was seen alive was October 23rd of 1964. So just 1 month prior was the last time we had seen her alive. Another body would be discovered on February 16th of 1965. She was found between some overgrowth between a storage shed and the undergrowth. Her toenails and feet were seen by a worker because they were sticking out, and this was at the Heron Trading Estate in Acton. She was in a makeshift grave. She was last seen scouting for clients on January 11th of 1965, so over a month prior. And it's believed that she was taken that same evening. Her body was determined to have been kept in a warm environment, which causes strange effects on the skin, especially when you're decomposing. Climate has a lot to do with the rapid rate of decomposition on the human body. If you've never looked into it, I highly recommend you read about it because it's actually pretty interesting. It also can affect when there's insect activity on a body as well, which I also find rather fascinating. I know I am a disturbing human being. Anywho, she too had paint flecks on her body, which actually was traced back to a transformer which was near where she was found. The type of paint that was found on her is industrial paint. Same as the flecks on the other 2 that we had seen it on. So this industrial paint was similar to that of the Napier Aero Engine Factory, which had been closed down in mid-1964. And this paint in particular was found on the victims, which was similar to that was found in the boiler room of the factory, and determined that the boiler room is where these bodies were hidden. I will give you a food for thought before I kind of talk about why the change in kind of the discovery areas. So any forensic evidence that was found on any of these victims has been lost. They don't know where it is, or it was destroyed, which is highly irritating because they're never going to find out who this person is without that. Never. Simply based on the fact of the age of this crime, unless there was newer spans of crimes like this, nope, they're never going to find out who Jack the Stripper is. So, so the change of where they found these bodies, I presume, is because whoever the killer is noticed that they were finally picking up that, hey, people are being found near the Thames, near Duke's Meadows. Let me switch it up a bit so I won't get caught. And I would imagine he probably perused the area to make sure that nobody would catch him, that the police weren't in the area. So, unless it was his thought process of, hey, I need to get the cops away from where I want to leave all these bodies. Let me do this and get them out of the way, So, back to that confession I kind of talked about. So, on April 24th of 1964, there was a confession that was made by Kenneth Archibald, of whom was then questioned about the murder of Irene Lockwood. He came forward about the murder around the time he was facing charges for another crime, which was for theft at a former employer. He was then charged with the murder of Irene Lockwood, but he would break down after arriving for court and admitted that he lied. He was depressed due to what was going on in his life. He then was acquitted and he was set free. He is suspect number 1 on our list. He admitted, but he confessed that he lied about it. Our second one is Mungo Ireland. So Mungo Ireland also went by Big John. He was employed by Heron Trading Estate, which is the Napier Arrow Engine Factory estate. And he was a security officer that was patrolling this plant. And this is where Bridget O'Hara was found. So, I mean, then I don't remember if I actually specified that that last body that I talked about is that of Bridget O'Hara. So if I didn't, apologies. That's her name. Yeah, so he came up as a suspect. Freddie Mills is another one. He's suspected to be the killer due to his sexual violence, but that has never been fully corroborated. There was also an unnamed Metropolitan Police officer who, in Jack of Jumps by David Seabrook wrote about a suspicious detective that raised eyebrows about possibly having involvement in these killings. This is mentioned in other books as well about this same person. It's never been fully confirmed or denied. Tommy Butler was another one who was named in a book called The Survivor as possibly Jack the Stripper, but it's unknown. Our last one is Harold Jones. Harold Jones killed 2 females in Abertillery. Yes. He was sentenced to life, but he was released in 1941 on good behavior. Apparently, all of the victims that he had, so those 2 victims he had, suffered extreme sexual violence, like that of, like, the other murders that we discussed. He was only 15 at the time of those 2 original ones, and that was in 1921. But he's been presumed as a suspect. There is a thought that Bridget O'Hara was a birthday present for himself because she went missing on his birthday, and unfortunately we don't know for sure because he died in 1971. So these crimes changed, obviously, like I previously mentioned, after they discovered... Oh hey, there's an actual fire. Ooh. So these crimes changed their placement after this discovery of the use of the Thames, and the killer changed their course. It's also believed that these women were strangled while they were giving their killer oral sex. Teeth were taken from these women, possibly as a trophy, or more than likely was a trophy. So it's believed that when they were in the act, that is when he used all of his force around their neck, causing that severe bruising and strangling them, manually strangling them to death. He must have been an extremely, extremely strong man in order to do that, because it takes such a strong force to cut off that air supply, basically crushing your trachea, to inflict that much pain on somebody. But that, my friends, is the Hammersmith Nude Murders. I hope you enjoyed and learned something from it. I always feel kind of weird saying I hope you enjoyed, but I will see you guys in my next video, which would be my true crime recap for the week. So I hope you have a good one. Bye!